In the stillness of night, when the moonlight dances on the surface of a quiet lake, a voice whispers through the trees. It's a mischievous laugh, high-pitched, teasing, playful, like the sound of someone who knows more than they should, someone who bends the rules with a wink and a smile. This voice belongs to the trickster. Trickster gods have existed since the dawn of human storytelling, and their presence is as old as the stars themselves. In every culture, across every corner of the world, there has been a figure who stands apart from the others, one who bends, breaks, or completely shatters the rules of the gods and men. Their mischief is never random. It always serves a deeper purpose, even if that purpose is simply to remind the world that nothing is as it seems. They pull at the fabric of reality, unraveling it, only to weave it back together in ways no one expects. But this chaos, this trickery, isn't done out of malice, it is a force of change. From the fiery landscapes of ancient Greece to the vast deserts of Africa, trickster gods were always more than mere pranksters. They were the ones who made the impossible seem possible. They were the ones who, with a smile, could steal fire from the gods and give it to humanity. They were the ones who turned the world on its head, not because they wanted to destroy it, but because they understood that creation often comes from destruction. In the stories of these tricksters, chaos is not the enemy. It's a part of the process, the birth of something new. In ancient myths, the trickster was both a god and a rebel. They were the ones who would sneak into the heavens and steal knowledge, or slip into the underworld to play pranks on the dead. They spoke in riddles and spun webs of confusion. They were cunning, clever, and often unpredictable. But there was something deeply human about them, too. The trickster was often the one who exposed the flaws in the gods themselves, showing that even the highest powers had their weaknesses. And yet, in their mischief, the trickster did not always work alone. They had allies, and they made enemies, pulling others into their schemes, sometimes as willing participants, sometimes as unwitting pawns in their games. Take Loki, the Norse god whose name has become synonymous with trickery. He was the one who convinced the gods to accept the gift of a ship made from the beard of a giantess, the one who caused the death of the beloved god Baldur, yet he was also the one who helped the gods escape the destruction of Ragnarok. Loki was never entirely bad, never entirely good. He was the embodiment of paradox, a god who stood between worlds, never fully belonging to one side. Then there's Hermes, the Greek god whose tricks were as fast as his winged sandals. He stole cattle from Apollo when he was just a baby, then turned around and gave the gift of the lyre to the same god he had wronged. He was a messenger, yes, but also a thief, a guide, and a god of boundaries. Hermes understood that boundaries, whether between the mortal and divine, the living and the dead, were meant to be crossed, and sometimes, in the crossing, something new was born. Across the ocean in Africa, Anansi, the spider god of the Akan people, spun his webs not only to catch food but to catch wisdom, knowledge, and power. His tricks were not just about causing trouble, they were about teaching lessons. When he was tricked or outwitted, it wasn't a punishment, it was a chance for growth. His tales were passed down through generations, each one reminding people that intelligence, wit, and cunning were just as important as strength. But the trickster was not always a god of joy. In many stories, the trickster is also a destroyer, one who brings chaos to the order of things. Coyote, a figure in Native American mythologies, was often a trickster, but he was also a destroyer, one who created the world through his own blunders and missteps. He could be both foolish and wise, both a creator and a destroyer. His stories were a warning, reminding people that the world is shaped by forces beyond our control, forces that cannot be understood through simple reasoning or logic. It's easy to think of the trickster as just a troublemaker, someone who wants to stir the pot for the sake of amusement. But in these early myths, trickster gods served a much deeper, more profound purpose. They were the disruptors, the ones who challenged the status quo. They tore down the walls of certainty and showed that nothing in the world, no matter how sacred, was beyond questioning. And in their disruption, they created space for new ideas, new understandings, and new ways of being. In the earliest stories, these trickster gods had no clear moral compass. They were neither completely good nor completely bad. Their actions could bring great harm, but they could also bring great benefit. They were the agents of change, the catalysts that propelled humanity into new ways of thinking. They were the ones who taught that life is not about order and control, but about balance, about the tension between chaos and harmony. The trickster god did not just break the rules, they made new ones. And this is where the magic of the trickster lies. The very act of trickery is a rebellion against the fixed, the expected, and the unquestioned. It is a reminder that the world is not as simple as it seems, that there is always something lurking beneath the surface, something unpredictable and wild. The trickster calls out to us, urging us to look beyond appearances, to see the world as it really is, not as we wish it to be. In every culture, the trickster embodies a truth that is both unsettling and liberating. The world is not static. It is in constant motion, in flux, and we must be ready to adapt. The trickster's laughter is not a mockery, it's a celebration of life's unpredictability, a reminder that even in chaos, there is beauty, there is wisdom, and there is possibility. And perhaps, just perhaps, the trickster is more like us than we realize. They are the ones who make mistakes and learn from them, who break the rules and then build new ones. They are the ones who show us that even in our foolishness, there is something worth discovering. Loki's laughter echoed through the hall, but it wasn't a sound of joy, it was a sound that sent chills down the spines of gods and giants alike. It was the kind of laughter that made you uneasy, as though something was about to shift, to break, and nothing would ever be the same again. This was no ordinary laugh. It was the laugh of a trickster, one whose very presence blurred the lines between friend and foe, order and chaos. Loki, the trickster god of Norse mythology, was not someone who could be trusted to play by the rules. The rules were his to break. Born of a giantess and a god, Loki was never truly at home in either world. He was the embodiment of contradiction. His origins were as much about the breaking of boundaries as his later deeds would be. He wasn't a son of Asgard, yet he found himself in the company of the gods, walking their halls, sharing their feasts. And though he wasn't one of the Aesir, Loki was always at the center of their stories, a constant presence in the lives of gods and men alike. But no one ever quite knew if he was a friend or an enemy. Maybe he was both. Loki's mischief began early. He was the one who tricked the blind god Hr into killing his brother Baldur, the most beloved of the gods. It was Loki's machinations that led to Baldur's death, a death that would forever haunt the gods, leaving a gaping wound in the heart of Asgard. Yet, Loki's trickery wasn't just for destruction. He was also the one who helped the gods when they found themselves in trouble. When the gods needed to replace Thor's stolen hammer, it was Loki who came up with the plan. And when they needed a way to secure their fortress, Loki's cunning mind was often the key. But these acts of help came at a price. Loki never did anything without expecting something in return. His relationship with the gods was a complicated one. He was a brother to Thor, an ally to Odin, yet always a reminder that loyalty and betrayal often come wrapped in the same package. Loki's gifts and tricks were never selfless, even when they seemed to be. He was the god who could make you laugh and then leave you wondering if you'd just been played. Thor might have called him a friend, but Loki's true allegiance was always to himself. In his world, friendship was as fluid as the trickery he wove. But Loki's deepest connections were with the giants, the Jotnar, the enemies of the gods. It was with them that Loki found a kind of kinship. He was one of their own, born from their realm, yet he had chosen to walk in the halls of Asgard. It was here, in this uneasy dance between the gods and the giants, that Loki found his true power. His very existence was a reminder that the line between good and evil was thinner than anyone cared to admit. He didn't belong entirely to either side. His mind worked in ways the gods could not always predict, and his alliances shifted like sand in the wind. It was Loki's relationship with the gods and giants that ultimately led to the destruction of everything. His tricks had consequences, and those consequences were felt most deeply in the final days of the world, at Ragnarok. The gods had long known that Loki's mischief would one day lead to something darker, but none of them could ever fully prepare for the storm that was coming. Loki, the god who had once been a beloved member of Asgard, would become the harbinger of its doom. At Ragnarok, when the great battle between gods and giants was finally upon them, Loki's treachery reached its peak. He stood at the front lines, leading the giants in their assault on the gods. The god who had once been so close to the Aesir now fought against them. The very gods who had trusted him, who had celebrated his cleverness and wit, now found themselves staring into the eyes of a betrayer. Loki had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. It wasn't just Loki's betrayal that sealed the god's fate, though. It was the betrayal of trust, the breaking of the unspoken bond that had held the worlds together. When Loki stood against the gods, it wasn't just a god fighting against other gods, it was the tearing apart of the very fabric of the universe. The bonds between order and chaos, life and death, were no longer strong enough to hold the world together. Loki's actions were the spark that ignited the fire of Ragnarok. In his eyes, there was no right or wrong, there was only what served him in the moment. And when the fire spread, consuming the gods and giants alike, Loki stood at its heart, knowing that the world would never be the same again. Yet, even in his role as the destroyer, Loki wasn't entirely without remorse. His actions had set the stage for the end of all things, but he knew that this end would also bring about a new beginning. As the world burned around him, Loki's mind continued to turn. He had played his part, but he knew the game wasn't truly over. The end of the world would come, yes, but there would also be a rebirth. Even in his darkest moments, Loki could see the threads of change weaving through the flames, the possibility of something new emerging from the destruction. Loki, the trickster, was the god who showed that destruction was never just an end. It was always the start of something else. His tricks may have led to the death of gods, but they also set the stage for a new world to rise from the ashes. Through his mischief, Loki had taught the gods one of their hardest lessons, that all things, even the gods themselves, must change. And in that change, there is always the possibility of something greater emerging. But that lesson came at a price, and it was a price that only Loki understood. His laughter, which had once been a sound of joy and rebellion, now rang out as a mournful cry, echoing through the ruins of the old world. The trickster had played his part, and now there was no going back. The gods had been warned. But in the end, it was always Loki who had the last laugh. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow across the sky, when the earth trembled slightly beneath the weight of something extraordinary. From a cave high in the mountains, a child was born, one who would change the course of history. Hermes, the god of travelers, thieves, and mischief, came into the world with the kind of energy that could bend the rules of the very heavens themselves. The moment he took his first breath, he wasn't a mere infant, he was a force of nature. His mother, Maia, a nymph, couldn't have known what she was about to witness. She had given birth to a god, but not just any god. This was a god who, as soon as his tiny fingers grasped the world, began to change it. In an instant, he had escaped his cradle and was already plotting a grand adventure. No sooner had he been born than he crept out of the cave, slipped past the other gods, and found his first target, Apollo's sacred cattle. Hermes was quick, nimble, and clever. It said that, within moments, he had snatched up Apollo's cattle, herding them away under the cover of darkness. But this wasn't just theft, it was a calculated act of cunning. He didn't just steal the cattle, he made sure to cover his tracks. He tied twigs to the hooves of the cattle, so they would appear to be walking backward, throwing Apollo off the scent. In this single act, Hermes had already shown the world what he was capable of. He could slip through the cracks, unseen, unnoticed, and leave chaos in his wake. But it wasn't just about the trickery. It was about the thrill, the joy of outsmarting others, of playing with the rules that everyone else followed. When Apollo discovered that his cattle had vanished, he was furious. He searched high and low, but it was Hermes, with a wide grin on his face, who ultimately confessed. Yet even in his confession, there was something playful, something mischievous in his eyes. Apollo, the god of the sun and music, was no fool, but against Hermes' quick wit and silver tongue, he was caught in a trap. The young god had not only stolen Apollo's cattle, but had also stolen his heart. Apollo forgave Hermes, and in a twist of fate, the two became allies. Apollo gave Hermes a golden staff, a symbol of his new role as the messenger of the gods. From that moment on, Hermes was no longer just a trickster. He became the one the gods turned to when they needed something done quickly, quietly, and without question. As the messenger of the gods, he moved between the realms with ease. He carried messages from Olympus to the mortal world, guiding the souls of the dead into the afterlife, ensuring that the boundaries between the living and the dead were respected. Yet even as he served the gods, his own nature never changed. He was both a helper and a deceiver, a god of order and chaos, depending on which side of him you encountered. There was something uniquely unsettling about Hermes. He was the patron of thieves, after all, and in a world where the gods were bound by rules and laws, Hermes had none. He was a figure who could slip between worlds without leaving a trace. His presence was both a comfort and a warning. He could be the messenger who brought you a divine blessing or the trickster who turned your life upside down with a single wink. He was a god who blurred the lines between what was good and what was bad, between what was right and what was wrong. He moved between the gods and mortals with a kind of grace that made him impossible to pin down. On one hand, he was the god who guided souls to the afterlife, ensuring that the dead were treated with respect. He was the god who aided heroes on their quests, offering them wisdom or protection when needed. But on the other hand, Hermes was the god who took what wasn't his and made it his own. He was the one who tricked, deceived, and misled those who thought they could outsmart him. His very essence was a reminder that nothing in life, be it wealth, status, or even divine power, was ever truly secure. Hermes could steal it all, or he could give it all away, depending on what amused him in the moment. This duality was at the heart of who Hermes was. He wasn't a villain, nor was he a hero. He was both. He embodied the complexity of life itself, never fitting neatly into any one category, always moving between the lines that separated light from dark. The gods needed him, and they feared him, for they knew that no one could predict what he would do next. Was he there to help, or was he there to make a joke at your expense? There was no way to tell. He had the power to bring gifts, to offer wisdom, to help in times of need, but those gifts came with a cost. They were often wrapped in layers of trickery. When he helped the hero Perseus, he didn't simply hand over the tools Perseus would need to defeat Medusa. He gave him the tools along with riddles and instructions that required more than just physical strength to succeed. Perseus had to rely on his wits, just as Hermes had relied on his own. Even in his acts of kindness, there was a challenge, a test, a reminder that nothing in life was ever as simple as it seemed. And yet, there was a part of Hermes that seemed to understand the human condition in ways the other gods could not. He was a god of boundaries, the ones between life and death, between the known and the unknown, between the mortal and the divine. He understood that to truly live, one had to embrace both sides of existence, the light and the dark, the order and the chaos. Hermes was both a god who helped and a god who hindered. He was a messenger, but he was also a master of mischief. He walked the line between worlds, carrying messages that could save or destroy, depending on his whims. Hermes' story wasn't just about the tricks he played or the roles he filled. It was about understanding that life isn't black and white, it's full of gray areas. He taught the gods and mortals alike that sometimes, to understand the world, you had to let go of the idea that there was one right way to do things. Sometimes, the answer wasn't in the rules, it was in the breaking of them. And Hermes, with his clever eyes and ever-present grin, was the one who reminded everyone that life was never as simple as it seemed. The darkness of the African night is punctuated only by the faint glow of firelight dancing across the faces of villagers gathered around a storyteller. And there, in the silence that follows the storyteller's first words, the air thick with anticipation, a name is spoken, Anansi. The name itself feels like the shiver of a spider's web, delicate yet unbreakable, full of promise and mystery. Anansi is not just a trickster, he is the very essence of cleverness, the embodiment of intelligence wrapped in the form of a spider. His stories have been passed down for generations, woven into the fabric of African folklore, carrying with them lessons that cut deeper than a simple trick. Anansi was not always the spider he is known as today. In his early days, he was a man, a creature of the earth, just like any other. But Anansi was never content with the world as it was. He saw how the great powers of the world, the sun, the moon, and the earth itself, held dominion over the land. To him, these forces were great, yes, but they were also blind to the most important power of all, the power of wit. And so, Anansi set about to prove that intelligence, not strength, not size, was the true source of power. In his heart, he knew that the world's greatest treasure was not hidden away in gold or jewels, but in the cunning mind. With the patience of a spider weaving its web, Anansi made his first move. He sought the great creator god, Nyam, who held the stories of the world. Nyam alone knew the wisdom of the earth, the sky, the stars, the rivers, and all the things that lived. It was said that Nyam had the wisdom to shape the world as he pleased, and it was this knowledge Anansi craved. But how could a small, humble spider challenge such a mighty being? How could he, who was nothing compared to the power of the Creator, hope to claim something so vast? Anansi did what he did best. He used his mind. With a plan that seemed too wild, too ridiculous to work, he approached Nyam and asked for the wisdom of the world, offering instead a series of impossible tasks. He promised Nyam that if he could perform these deeds, then he would earn the right to the wisdom that so many longed for. One by one, Anansi outsmarted the god's challenges. He tricked a hornet, outwitted a leopard, and even managed to capture a giant fish. With each victory, his reputation grew, and soon, Nyam had no choice but to grant Anansi the knowledge he sought. It was through this series of tricks that Anansi earned the right to claim the stories of the world as his own. But this wasn't just about gaining power, it was about teaching others the value of intelligence over brute force. Anansi's victories were not about strength or size, they were about wit, cleverness, and the ability to think outside the boundaries of what seemed possible. Through his tricks, he showed that sometimes, the smallest, most unlikely being could accomplish the greatest feats. But Anansi's stories didn't just serve as examples of his intelligence, they carried deeper meanings, rooted in the values of African societies. His tales often came with lessons, that the clever can outwit the strong, that patience and perseverance can conquer obstacles, and that no one, no matter how small, should ever be underestimated. In his world, Anansi was the underdog who always came out on top. Yet, even when he won, there was often a lesson embedded in the trick itself. His stories were moral lessons, demonstrating how intelligence could shape not only the world around him, but also the very nature of life itself. There was one story in particular that captured the essence of Anansi's role as a trickster. It was the tale of the sky god, Nyam, who had held all the world's wisdom close to his chest, hoarding it away from the people. Anansi, with his eyes sharp and calculating, knew that this was something he could change. He understood that knowledge should not be hoarded by the gods, but shared with everyone, for it was through wisdom that humanity could find balance and meaning. But Anansi's methods were not always straightforward. When he approached Nyam to ask for the stories of the world, Nyam had no intention of giving them up easily. So, Anansi devised a cunning plan. He agreed to the challenge of capturing some of the most dangerous creatures in the world and bringing them to Nyam. The creatures, beasts like the leopard, the hornet, and the giant fish, were fearsome, and no one had ever managed to contain them before. Yet, using only his wits, Anansi captured each of them in turn, bringing them to Nyam as proof of his ability. Anansi's tale, like many others, was not simply about him outwitting his opponents. It was about the deep, unspoken truth that lies at the heart of all trickster stories. The smallest among us can change the world, not through brute force or violence, but through intelligence, wit, and courage. Anansi was more than a spider. He was a force that defied expectations, a reminder that every person, no matter how small, has the potential to reshape their fate. And yet, even as Anansi played his tricks, he wasn't immune to the consequences of his actions. For while he might trick the gods, he often found himself tangled in the webs of his own making. His cleverness, though valuable, came at a cost. It reminded the people who heard his stories that intelligence, though powerful, can also be dangerous. There are times when the desire to outwit others can lead to unintended consequences, and Anansi's own adventures often mirrored the fine line between cleverness and deceit. The moral lessons of Anansi's tales were as complex as the webs he spun. They taught that wisdom could be both a blessing and a curse. They showed that knowledge, once gained, could change the world, sometimes for the better, and sometimes in ways that no one could predict. Anansi's antics were not just about getting what he wanted, they were about teaching the listener to think, to question, and to understand the true power of the mind. The trickster god who spun webs of deceit also spun webs of understanding, reminding everyone that there was more than one way to look at the world. Through Anansi, the trickster spider, the people of West Africa learned that the clever and the wise would always have a place in the world. But they also learned that with great power came great responsibility, and that sometimes, even the cleverest minds can become ensnared by their own webs. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the echoes of ancient stories, stories of a creature both revered and feared. Coyote. His name would make even the bravest warriors pause for a moment, for Coyote was not just a creature of flesh and bone, but a spirit who could shape the world with a flick of his tail. His laughter echoed across the plains, a sound as wild as the wind itself, full of mischief, and yet, there was something deeper, something sacred, in that laughter. Coyote was a trickster, but in the trickery, there were lessons that would never be forgotten. Across the vast and varied landscapes of Native America, Coyote was a figure who appeared in nearly every culture, from the Navajo to the Lakota, the Zuni to the Apache. He was both a creator and a destroyer, a friend and a foe. But most of all, Coyote was a teacher. In his wild ways, he showed the people something essential, the balance between wisdom and folly, the line between cunning and foolishness, and the understanding that life itself could be unpredictable, full of twists and turns. Coyote's stories are as old as the land itself. In the Navajo tradition, he is both the creator and the destroyer, the one who brings the sun to the world, but also the one who causes mischief, sometimes with disastrous consequences. In the Lakota myths, Coyote is a trickster who brings about change, but often at great personal cost. He is neither purely good nor purely bad, and therein lies his power. He is the force that drives the world forward, constantly challenging the gods and the people to question their place in the universe. One of the most famous stories of Coyote comes from the Navajo people, where he is said to have played a key role in the creation of the world. The earth was dark, empty, and silent, until Coyote came along and found a way to bring the sun into the sky. But in his impatience and haste, Coyote made a fatal mistake. He thoughtlessly tossed the sun into the sky, not realizing the power it would hold. The sun blazed too brightly, scorching the earth. It was only when Coyote's own people begged him to fix it that he realized the consequences of his actions. In the end, it took a great deal of cleverness, and a lot of humility, for Coyote to right his wrongs. The lesson here was clear: even those with great power can make mistakes, but wisdom lies in owning those mistakes and learning from them. Coyote's role in creation wasn't always straightforward. In some stories, he creates the world by accident, simply by being himself, wild, untamed, and full of energy. He often steps into roles that no one expects, solving problems in unconventional ways. But there are moments, too, when his trickster nature leads to chaos. He is the one who challenges the natural order, pushing the boundaries of what is accepted. Coyote never follows the rules, he makes his own. And in this defiance, there is a reminder that sometimes the rules must be broken for new things to be born. But Coyote's mischief wasn't just about causing trouble. It had purpose. The Lakota people tell of Coyote's role in the creation of the stars. In this story, Coyote is the one who brings fire to the people, but not in a straightforward way. He steals fire from the sun, not realizing the harm it will cause. Yet through this act of trickery, he brings warmth to the cold world. In his own way, Coyote shows that every gift, every blessing, comes with a price. In his selfishness, he makes the world better, but the lesson is clear: things are never as simple as they seem. Coyote's stories are filled with moments of failure, where his schemes backfire, and he faces the consequences of his actions. Yet, these are not stories of punishment, they are stories of growth. In his wildest tricks, there is an underlying wisdom, a lesson about the unpredictability of life. Sometimes, things go wrong, and sometimes, they go right. It's all a part of the larger story. In the world of Coyote, nothing is certain. He embodies the idea that life is full of surprises, full of moments where things don't go as planned, but that's where the true magic happens. For Coyote, mistakes weren't to be feared. They were simply part of the journey. In one particularly famous tale, Coyote is said to have tricked a powerful buffalo, pretending to be dead in order to steal its meat. He lay motionless in the grass, fooling the buffalo into thinking he was a carcass. But as soon as the buffalo came close, Coyote sprang to life, laughing at the creature's expense. Yet, as he walked away with his prize, he learned the hard way that his trick had consequences. The buffalo's herd came for him, angry and relentless. The laughter died on Coyote's lips as he faced the anger of the herd. In this story, the lesson was clear: trickery can be fun, but it often comes with unexpected costs. Coyote's role as a trickster was also a way for the people to understand the world around them. In his antics, the people saw reflections of their own lives, how they, too, could be clever, but also how their own actions could lead to unintended consequences. Coyote was a mirror to human nature, showing both the light and the dark. He was the embodiment of both wisdom and folly, a reminder that life is about balance, about knowing when to act and when to step back. In many Native American tribes, Coyote's stories were more than just entertainment. They were moral lessons, passed down from one generation to the next. The tales were not about punishing Coyote, but about understanding the world and one's place in it. He was a character that made the people laugh, yes, but he also made them think. His stories were an invitation to reflect on the complexities of life, how the trickster in all of us can lead to moments of growth, and how those moments are often born out of chaos, laughter, and the wild, unpredictable nature of the world. Coyote's role as a trickster was to remind everyone that the world, in all its beauty and danger, was a place where the unexpected could happen. Life was both sacred and messy, filled with both joy and sorrow. But above all, it was always full of possibility. And in this wild, unpredictable dance of existence, Coyote led the way, his howl carrying the message that there was magic in the mess, beauty in the chaos, and lessons in the tricks we play. Under the silvery glow of the moon, the shadows in the forest shifted, swirling as if the trees themselves whispered secrets into the night. There, amidst the stillness, a flash of red fur darted between the trees. A soft, almost imperceptible sound like the rustle of leaves followed. It was the kitsune. With a flick of its bushy tail, it was gone. The world paused for a heartbeat. Was it a spirit? A trickster? A guardian? In the realm of Japanese mythology, nothing is ever just one thing, and Kitsune, the fox spirit, embodies that duality in a way that is both mesmerizing and mystifying. Kitsune, with its luminous eyes and agile grace, is more than just a creature of folklore. In Japan, the fox is a being of great power, revered, feared, and celebrated. From the ancient villages of rural Japan to the bustling streets of modern cities, the legend of the kitsune lives on, and the quiet rustle of leaves, the flicker of a fox's tail, or the distant echo of a voice carried on the wind. These beings, with their cunning and mysterious ways, are known for both their trickery and their wisdom. They are shapeshifters, capable of transforming into beautiful women, cunning men, or even powerful deities, using their beauty and wit to ensnare or enlighten those they encounter. At first glance, Kitsune appears as a trickster, just as other mythological figures are. But the stories told about them are never simple, nor are they ever one-sided. The kitsune's tricks are not always malicious, often they are playful, with a deeper purpose behind them. They enjoy weaving illusions, playing with human emotions, leading people down paths of desire or fear, and making them question the world they think they know. These pranks, however, are rarely without consequence. In one story, a man falls in love with a beautiful woman only to realize that she is not human but a kitsune in disguise. She vanishes as mysteriously as she appeared, leaving him with nothing but a heart full of longing and confusion. It's in these moments that the true nature of the kitsune becomes clear, not merely a deceiver, but a being with the power to reveal deeper truths about the human soul. Kitsune are more than just tricksters. They also serve as protectors. In the world of Japanese mythology, they are believed to be the messengers of the rice deity, Inari, and guardians of the sacred shrines dedicated to her. These fox spirits are often seen in pairs, standing watch over the sacred grounds, their eyes sharp and alert, guarding both the spiritual and physical realms. Their presence is a sign of protection, a reminder that the gods are watching and that they, in their quiet, subtle way, are ensuring the safety of those who honor them. In these roles, kitsune are seen not as beings of chaos, but as figures of sacred duty, using their powers to shield and guide those who are worthy of their care. But even in their role as protectors, kitsune remain creatures of complexity, embodying both light and shadow. In some stories, they are saviors, helping lost travelers find their way or offering guidance to those in need. In others, they are tricksters, using their supernatural abilities to test human character, sometimes leading people astray to see if they will falter or persevere. The kitsune teaches a vital lesson, to be guarded in one's dealings with the world, but to also have faith in the unseen forces that guide us, even when we are unsure of their intentions. The evolution of the kitsune, from a mischievous creature to a revered spirit, reflects the broader shifts in Japanese society and belief systems. Initially, foxes were seen with suspicion, their association with the spirit world coloring them as creatures to be wary of. In ancient times, they were believed to be the messengers of evil spirits, capable of bringing sickness or misfortune. Over time, however, as their role in the mythology deepened, so too did their relationship with humanity. They became not only symbols of cunning and magic but also of wisdom and protection. As the centuries passed, the kitsune's dual nature became more apparent, both a playful trickster and a guardian deity, sometimes both in the same tale. As time progressed, the kitsune's role shifted further. Once seen as creatures to be feared, their status gradually became more sacred. In the world of Inari shrines, kitsune are seen as divine beings, messengers that help bridge the gap between the human and spiritual worlds. Small fox statues, often made of stone or wood, can be found guarding the entrances to these shrines, their eyes watching over the faithful, their tails raised in silent, eternal vigilance. The fox spirit became a revered protector, one whose tricks, though mischievous, were always part of a greater plan, a plan that could bring blessings to those who honored them and teach those who did not. In the folklore, the kitsune is often depicted as a creature that is both incredibly wise and deeply empathetic. They possess the power to read human emotions, to understand desires and fears, and they use this knowledge in their interactions with people. The fox spirit understands the fragility of human hearts, and so, in some of the more touching stories, they show kindness and tenderness to those who are suffering or lost. There is one tale where a kitsune transforms into a beautiful woman to marry a man, only to leave him after years together. She reveals her true form, and in her departure, leaves behind a gift, a small token of her affection. Even though she has tricked him, the gift she leaves behind is a reminder that, sometimes, the greatest lessons come in the form of loss, and that not all tricks are played out of malice. As the fox spirit evolved, the line between trickster and protector blurred, and the kitsune became a symbol of the complexity of human nature itself. Just as people are neither entirely good nor entirely bad, the kitsune exists in a space between, holding both light and shadow in a delicate balance. Its tricks are not always meant to deceive, and its protections are not always clear. In many ways, the kitsune is the reflection of the mysteries of life, unpredictable, full of beauty, and at times, unsettling. But in its dual roles, it teaches us to look deeper, to see beyond the surface, and to find wisdom in places we may not always understand. It's said that if you encounter a kitsune in the forest, you will be forever changed. You may leave with a heart full of wonder or one broken by the trickery of the fox spirit. But in either case, you will never forget the encounter. For the kitsune does not just pass through the world, it leaves a mark, a trace of its magic, a lesson, a memory that lingers long after the fox has disappeared into the night. In the end, the fox spirit teaches us that nothing is ever truly as it seems, and that both magic and wisdom are found in the most unexpected of places. The sky crackled with the fury of the gods. Thunder rumbled, and the air felt thick with tension, as though the heavens themselves were holding their breath. Below, the earth was dark, lifeless, cold. But in a small, humble corner of the world, there stood a figure, bold, defiant, and fearless in the face of divine wrath. Prometheus. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with the fire he had just stolen from the gods. A spark of rebellion, a burning desire to give humanity what they so desperately lacked: warmth, light, and the promise of a future brighter than the endless night that stretched before them. Prometheus wasn't the kind of trickster who delighted in causing chaos for the sake of fun. His trickery wasn't meant to amuse, it was meant to change the world. And in that change, he saw hope. Hope that humanity, weak and fragile as it was, could rise above its limitations. Hope that, with fire, people could forge their own path, carve out their own destiny, and no longer live in the shadow of the gods. But Prometheus knew that this act of kindness, this grand gesture of defiance, would not go unpunished. He had crossed a line. He had stolen from the gods, defied the natural order, and for that, he would pay the price. The gift of fire was nothing short of a miracle. It was the spark of civilization itself. Before it, humanity lived in the cold, without warmth, without light. The dark, endless night was their only companion. But with fire, things changed. It wasn't just warmth for the body, it was warmth for the spirit. With fire came the ability to cook food, to protect oneself from the beasts of the wild, and to craft tools that could shape the very earth. It was the beginning of everything. Prometheus knew the power of fire, and he saw the potential it held for humankind. It was more than a physical gift, it was a symbol of human ingenuity, of the drive to survive, to thrive, to create. But to give fire to humanity was to challenge the gods. Zeus, the king of the gods, saw it as a direct affront to his authority, a bold declaration that humanity, without divine intervention, could flourish. The gods watched as Prometheus' gift spread across the earth, and they were furious. How dare he? How could he, a mere mortal, think that he could defy their will, that he could take from them and give to humanity what they had kept locked away in their celestial vault? The anger of the gods was swift, and their punishment as unforgiving as it was cruel. Zeus, in his rage, ordered Prometheus to be bound to a rock, where an eagle would come each day to tear at his liver, feasting on it as Prometheus' own body healed overnight. It was a punishment that never ceased, a cycle of pain that would last for eternity. With every passing moment, the trickster who had once been the bringer of hope, of fire, now found himself trapped in an unending nightmare. His crime was not that he had acted out of malice, but that he had dared to act at all, to challenge the gods and give humankind a taste of power that was never meant to be theirs. The fire he had stolen now seemed like a distant dream, a fleeting moment of glory that had cost him everything. And yet, there was something undeniably tragic about Prometheus' fate. For all the suffering he endured, he never showed regret. His defiance wasn't born of arrogance or vanity, it was born of love for humankind. He had given them fire not because he wanted to be a hero, but because he believed in them. He believed that they could rise, that they could become something more than mere playthings of the gods. And that belief, that selfless act, had led him to an eternity of torment. Prometheus was a fool, perhaps, but a fool who saw something the gods could never see, the potential for greatness in the hearts of mortals. With each passing day, the eagle came, its sharp beak tearing into Prometheus' flesh, but still, he never cried out. He never begged for mercy. In his agony, he found something that the gods could not take from him, his purpose. His sacrifice, his defiance, was not in vain. For in giving fire, he had given humanity the means to stand on their own, to create, to build, and to rise above their limitations. And though the gods could take everything else from him, they could never take that. The fire would never die out, not as long as humanity lived and fought for their place in the world. Even in the face of such unrelenting punishment, Prometheus never once regretted his actions. He had given fire not to anger the gods, but to kindle a flame in the hearts of humankind. His act of trickery had been one of selflessness, a gamble that had cost him everything but had also gifted humanity the one thing that would forever change their world. As the fire burned bright on the earth, so too did the flame of hope that Prometheus had ignited. His suffering, his endless torment, would not erase that truth. The tale of Prometheus is not just one of trickery, it is one of sacrifice. It is a story of a god who defied the heavens for the sake of others, who gave everything for a future he would never see. It is a reminder that sometimes, the greatest gifts come with the heaviest costs. Prometheus, the foolish trickster, had given fire to the world, but in doing so, he had also shown humanity the price of progress, the price of defiance, and the price of love. For what is fire, if not a force that burns bright and dangerous, yet gives life, warmth, and light in return? In that fiery gift, Prometheus had left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that would never fade, not even as the gods' punishment sought to extinguish it. In the heart of Mesoamerica, where the jungle breathes with ancient whispers and the mountains carry the weight of forgotten gods, there exists a tale of a god so complex, so full of contradiction, that it echoes through the ages. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a being of beauty and danger, creation and destruction, trickster and savior. His story is a tapestry woven with light and shadow, where his actions brought both blessings and curses to the world, a reminder of the power that lies in deception and the cost of playing with the forces that govern life. It was said that Quetzalcoatl, with his radiant feathers and serpentine form, walked among the people, teaching them wisdom, knowledge, and the gifts of civilization. He gifted humanity corn, the sacred grain, and showed them the arts of weaving, of architecture, and of music. His kindness was legendary. He nurtured the people as a mother nurtures her children, guiding them with a gentle hand and a loving heart. But even in his kindness, there was something restless within him. The gods who had once welcomed him had begun to turn their eyes away, displeased with his growing influence on the earth. There was another side to Quetzalcoatl, a side that no one could ignore, a trickster side that reveled in mischief. Like all tricksters, he didn't always play by the rules, didn't always fit into the mold that others expected him to. And in his defiance of the gods, Quetzalcoatl dared to disrupt the very order that held the world together. It began with a game of deceit, a clever trick that would change everything. Quetzalcoatl's deceit wasn't born of malice, but of necessity. The gods were growing weary of humanity's flourishing, and Quetzalcoatl, knowing that his time among the people was short, decided to trick them. He tricked the gods themselves, stealing their divine powers and using them to create the world as it was meant to be. In this act of defiance, he created something new, something beautiful, but also something unstable. His trickery was both a gift and a curse. For in taking what was not his, he set into motion a series of events that would lead to destruction, as if the very balance of the cosmos had been thrown off course. The beauty of Quetzalcoatl lay in his contradictions. He was a creator, yes, but he was also a destroyer. His trickery did not come from a desire to harm, but from a belief that change was necessary. The gods, in their arrogance, had failed to see that the world needed to evolve. And so, Quetzalcoatl took it upon himself to bring that change, to shake the heavens and earth, to break down the barriers that kept humanity from reaching their potential. His trick was one of liberation, one that freed the people from the constraints of the gods, but it came at a cost. For in tricking the gods, Quetzalcoatl had to pay the ultimate price. The gods, in their fury, banished him from the heavens, casting him down to the earth. But even in his exile, Quetzalcoatl's actions resonated with those who remembered him. He had given them the gift of knowledge, of light, of wisdom. His destruction had brought forth the world as they knew it, and the world, for better or for worse, would never be the same. But the most heartbreaking part of Quetzalcoatl's story was not the trickery or the punishment, it was the fact that, in the end, his greatest creation was his own undoing. The people he had loved, the people he had nurtured, had begun to worship him. They had begun to follow him, to idolize him, to expect his protection and his guidance. They had grown so dependent on his gifts that they failed to see the consequences of their own actions. They began to demand more from him, more than he could give, more than he was capable of. In the quiet of the night, as Quetzalcoatl looked upon the world he had shaped, he saw the seeds of destruction taking root. His trickery had altered the course of humanity's fate, but it had also turned them into something he had never intended. The gods had been right to banish him. His very presence was a reminder that even the greatest gifts, when given without caution, could become burdens too heavy to bear. The trickster god who had once reveled in the joy of creation now found himself burdened by the weight of his own deceit. But in that moment, as he stood alone, far from the world he had made, Quetzalcoatl saw something else. In the distance, he saw the flicker of fire, the spark of a new beginning. It was humanity, still struggling, still reaching for the light. They had fallen, yes, but they were not broken. The trickster god, now alone in his exile, knew that this was the price of creation, that all things, no matter how beautiful, must fall apart before they can rise again. His deception had set the world on its path, but in that path was the chance for something greater. The myth of Quetzalcoatl is one of great beauty and terrible sorrow. It is a story of a god who gave everything for humanity, who took from the gods to create something new, something bold. But in that gift, he lost himself. His trickery was not a malevolent act, it was a necessary one, a test of the gods' control and a means of giving humanity a chance to grow beyond their limitations. The trickster god, who had once been so full of life, now found himself fading into legend, his name spoken only in whispers. Yet, even in his fall, there was something undeniably poignant about his story. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is not just a trickster, he is a reminder that creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. He taught humanity that sometimes, the greatest gifts come with the heaviest burdens, and that the cost of progress is often paid in the most unexpected ways. The deceit that started with a single, bold act of rebellion had transformed the world, and in doing so, had changed the course of history. And though Quetzalcoatl was gone, his legacy lived on in the hearts of those who dared to dream, to create, and to believe in the power of transformation. In the shadow of the ancient oak trees, when the moon hung low in the sky, there was a figure that danced in the twilight, a shadow, a flicker, a fleeting trickster. His laugh echoed through the woods, light as a breeze, as if the very air around him had been enchanted. Puck, or Robin Goodfellow, was not just a name but a force, a playful, mischievous spirit who wove himself through the fabric of Celtic folklore like a ribbon through a breeze. He was the embodiment of magic, chaos, and transformation, a figure who moved between the human world and the realm of the fair folk with a grin on his face and a heart full of tricks. To speak of Puck is to speak of the wildness of nature itself. The rolling hills, the murmuring streams, the thick woods that hid secrets from mortal eyes, these were his playgrounds. He was not bound by rules, by the ordinary rhythm of the world. Instead, he thrived on bending those rules, twisting them like a vine around the trunk of an ancient tree. He was a creature who lived for mischief, for the sudden, unexpected change that could turn a quiet moment into something magical or chaotic. With a mischievous glint in his eye, Puck could make the stars dance in the sky or make a lover's heart shift in the most bewildering of ways. In the legends, he would often be found wandering the forests with the fair folk, the otherworldly beings who seemed just a breath away from human understanding but existed in a realm beyond comprehension. They were the sprites, the fae, the changelings, beings who flitted in and out of the mortal world, leaving behind nothing but the faintest trace of their presence. And Puck, the trickster, was their ringleader, the one who could weave the threads of human fate in the most unpredictable of patterns. Puck's mischief was never born from malice, it was born from a kind of impish love for the chaos of life itself. He would stir the hearts of mortals, making them fall in love with the wrong person, only to watch with glee as they untangled themselves from the mess he had created. He would turn night into day and day into night, all for the sheer joy of watching how the world would react to his whims. He was the one who turned the world upside down, challenging the boundaries between reality and imagination, pushing the limits of what was possible, and making it all feel like a dream. The stories of Puck often crossed into the realm of the supernatural. He was not just a figure of fun, he was a bridge between two worlds, one foot in the realm of humans, the other in the mysterious domain of the fae. It was said that in his presence, the air itself would shimmer with magic. The boundary between the human and the otherworldly would blur, and in that moment, anything could happen. A mortal could find themselves lost in the woods, chasing after a voice that seemed to call their name, only to find themselves standing on the edge of a cliff that they knew had never existed before. Or perhaps, the rustling leaves would give way to a sudden whisper, a soft voice in the breeze that carried an ancient secret, one that only Puck could share. But there was a deeper purpose to Puck's tricks than mere chaos. He embodied the intersection of the human and the supernatural, a constant reminder that the two worlds were not so different after all. His pranks were a way of showing humans that the world was not as predictable as they might think, that magic was never far away, hidden just beneath the surface of their daily lives. When a person laughed in surprise or fell into a moment of confusion, it was as if the veil between the two realms had been temporarily lifted. For a moment, they stood in the presence of something larger than themselves, a world where anything was possible, where every moment could be transformed into something more wondrous than they could ever imagine. Yet, Puck was not always a light-hearted figure. Like all tricksters, his actions carried consequences. For every prank that led to laughter, there was a moment of regret or bewilderment, as humans tried to make sense of the strange happenings he left in his wake. And there was a sadness, too, for Puck understood that his tricks were ultimately a reminder of how fragile the human heart could be, how easily people could be led astray, how quickly their own desires could blind them to what truly mattered. He was a trickster, yes, but he was also a mirror, showing the world not as it was, but as it could be, if only people allowed themselves to believe in the impossible. In one of the most famous tales, Puck's mischief becomes the catalyst for a love story turned upside down, a reminder of how easily hearts can be swayed by whimsy and desire. The fairies, with their magic dust and sparkling wings, play with the lives of mortals in ways that leave them forever changed. A love potion here, a mistaken identity there, and the world becomes a stage where nothing is certain except that everything will eventually fall into place, though not always in the way anyone expects. It is in these moments, when the human world collides with the supernatural, that Puck's true nature as a trickster shines. He is the one who disrupts, who pushes people out of their comfort zones, forcing them to confront the desires and fears that they often keep buried deep within. For Puck, the world was not a place for rigid structure and predictable outcomes. It was a place of constant transformation, where one moment could shift into another, where the impossible could become reality, and where the boundaries between the seen and the unseen were always in flux. He was both a reflection of humanity's deepest yearnings and a challenge to their understanding of the world. The way Puck danced between worlds, between the human and the supernatural, reflected the ever-changing nature of life itself. He reminded those who encountered him that life was not meant to be taken too seriously. In every trick, there was a spark of joy, a flicker of magic that reminded them of the wonder that lay just beyond their grasp. And in every twist, there was a challenge, a nudge to look beyond the surface and see the deeper truths hidden in plain sight. Puck was not just a trickster. He was a guide, a teacher, and a constant reminder that sometimes, to find the most important lessons in life, you first have to lose your way. In the vibrant world of Hindu mythology, where gods and mortals interlace in a delicate dance of fate and destiny, there is a thread that runs through the stories, winding and unpredictable, one of mischief, playfulness, and divine trickery. The trickster gods of Hinduism are not what one might expect. They do not simply deceive for the sake of disruption. Their tricks often carry a deeper meaning, a lesson in the very nature of the universe. One of the most beloved of these divine tricksters is Lord Krishna, whose playful antics have captivated hearts for centuries. His tales are filled with joy, laughter, and love, yet beneath the surface, they pulse with profound wisdom. Krishna was not a god of war like the mighty Shiva or a god of order like Brahma. No, Krishna was a god of love, of music, of beauty, and above all, a god of mischief. As a child, he was a master of playful pranks, stealing butter from the homes of the gopis, his beloved cowherd maidens, and causing all manner of harmless trouble. But these tricks, though mischievous, were not mere antics. In each playful theft, and every bit of mischief, there was a deeper truth about the nature of love and devotion. Krishna's pranks were a mirror, reflecting the hearts of those around him, testing their attachment to the material world and leading them toward a deeper, more spiritual understanding. As Krishna grew, his tricks became more profound, more divine in nature. He was not only a lover of life, but also a guide and teacher to his followers. The stories surrounding him, such as his mischievous actions in the Mahabharata, where he played a pivotal role in the events that shaped the destiny of the Kuru family, reveal a god whose wit and charm could alter the course of history. Krishna's trickery, though seemingly playful, was a form of divine intervention. In his cosmic dance of Maya, illusion, he invited those around him to let go of their ego and their attachment to the material world so they could embrace the divine truth of their existence. His most famous trick, an act that is perhaps as playful as it is profound, came during the epic battle of Kurukshetra. The great warrior Arjuna, hesitant and torn by doubt, stood on the precipice of battle, unsure of what to do. His heart weighed down by the potential bloodshed, he questioned the very meaning of life and death. It was then that Krishna, acting as Arjuna's charioteer, revealed his divine form, showing the warrior a vision of the universe in all its grandeur. Krishna's trick here was not just in his disguise as a humble charioteer, but in his ability to shatter Arjuna's limited understanding of reality, urging him to rise above his fears and embrace his dharma, his duty. The divine trickster turned the course of the war with nothing more than the power of his words and his playfulness. But Krishna's trickery was not only about the grand battles of the world. His charm, his wit, and his joy were seen in his everyday actions. His childhood is filled with stories of him stealing butter, tricking his friends, and playing the flute with such sweetness that the very earth seemed to listen. He embodied the belief that the divine is not only found in rituals or temples, but in the very act of living, full of love, full of joy, full of play. Krishna's tricks weren't just tricks, they were lessons on how to live. Through his mischief, he taught that life should be embraced with a light heart, that even the most difficult of times could be softened by a sense of humor and grace. Yet Krishna was not alone in his role as a divine trickster. Vishnu, another major deity in the Hindu pantheon, is often portrayed as taking on various avatars, each with its own form of divine intervention and trickery. In his incarnation as the dwarf Vamana, Vishnu outwitted the demon king Bali, restoring order to the cosmos through a clever ruse. Vishnu's trickery was not born out of malice but out of necessity, for the balance of the world depended on his interventions. It was in his playful, clever acts that the very fabric of the universe was upheld. But what does it mean for a god to be a trickster in the context of Hindu philosophy? In many ways, the trickster gods of Hinduism teach us that the world we see is not the true world. Krishna, with his enchanting flute, his playful smile, his divine pranks, reminds us that life is an illusion, Maya, and that we must not become too attached to the material things we see around us. Vishnu, through his avatars, shows us that the divine can take on many forms, each with its own unique way of teaching us the lessons we need to learn. These gods remind us that the universe is in constant motion, always shifting, always changing, and that we must learn to dance with it, to embrace the trickster in all its forms. The trickster gods of Hindu mythology also highlight a powerful truth, that mischief and play are not opposites of wisdom and spirituality. In fact, they are deeply connected. Krishna's tricks were meant to lead his followers to a greater understanding of life, of love, and of devotion. They showed that through surrendering to the divine play of life, through letting go of our rigid attachments to the material world, we can find a deeper, more meaningful connection with the universe. Krishna's love and his pranks, woven together, invited humanity to experience divinity not as something distant, but as something intimately woven into the fabric of everyday existence. In these divine tricksters, we see a deeper truth that transcends time and culture. Their mischievous ways are a reminder that the divine is not bound by the rules we impose on it. It can be playful and loving, full of laughter and light, while at the same time, profound and all-encompassing. Through Krishna's tricks, we learn to find the sacred in the everyday, to see the playfulness of life as a pathway to deeper wisdom. Vishnu's clever avatars remind us that even in the most difficult of times, the divine is always with us, guiding us with love and humor, helping us to navigate the chaos of the world with grace and ease. In their trickery, they reveal to us the deeper mysteries of life, teaching us that sometimes, to understand the truth, we must first embrace the mystery. In the vast, timeless expanse of Australia, beneath the endless sky and the shadow of ancient mountains, the stories of the Aboriginal peoples flow like a river, winding through the land. These stories are more than just myths, they are the lifeblood of a culture that spans tens of thousands of years. Among these tales, there are two figures whose very names whisper of creation, power, and mischief. Baiame and Duremulum are not just gods, they are tricksters, divine beings whose playful, yet profound actions shape the world in ways that are both beautiful and dangerous. Baiame is known as the Skyfather, the creator god who molded the earth, gave shape to the rivers and mountains, and breathed life into the first beings. But he is not just a figure of creation, he is a trickster, full of mysteries, paradoxes, and playful wisdom. In his hands, the power of the universe bends and shifts, yet beneath the grand acts of creation, there is a divine mischief at work. It is said that Baiame, like many tricksters, is capable of both nurturing and disrupting the balance of life. He could be stern, but he also had a sense of humor, as if he understood that the universe, and all its complexity, could not be fully understood without a bit of playful chaos. In the stories, Baiame created the land and the people, but he also shaped the laws that govern them. He taught them how to live, how to hunt, and how to gather food, but he also showed them that they must not become too attached to the land, for everything must flow and change. There are stories of Baiame taking the form of an eagle, soaring through the skies, watching over his creations, sometimes disappearing for years at a time, leaving the people to wonder about their creator's intentions. Was he watching over them or playing with their lives, testing them to see if they would grow on their own? The answer is never clear, as Baiame himself is as elusive as the wind, always present yet never fully understood. Then there is Duremulum, another figure whose trickery and power are intertwined with the very fabric of the universe. Duremulum is the son of Baiame, and like his father, he is a force of creation, yet his role is often one of divine mischief. The sky itself is said to be Duremulum's domain, and with it, he controls the thunder, the lightning, and the storms that sweep across the land. But Duremulum is not just a god of fury and chaos. He is also a god of wisdom and guidance, a mediator between the human and the divine. His trickery, like that of his father, is not cruel or thoughtless, it is a means of teaching, of awakening the spirits and testing the hearts of those who walk the earth. In the tales of Duremulum, the line between mischief and divine intervention is often blurred. There are stories of Duremulum sending storms to challenge the people, testing their strength and resolve, only to reveal in the end that the storm was never meant to destroy, but to renew. It was the gift of Duremulum that taught the people of the land that hardship was part of life's cycle. Sometimes, the earth had to be broken in order to heal. Sometimes the sky had to rage to remind them of the power of nature. Through his divine tricks, Duremulum was not just shaping the weather, he was shaping the very soul of the people. But the trickery of Baiame and Duremulum is not just about storms or the testing of the human spirit. There is a deeper, more cosmic aspect to their actions. Baiame, in his role as the creator, built the world as a living, breathing entity, full of contradictions and mysteries. Yet, it is through his trickery that he reminds us of the fragile nature of existence. In his stories, the line between the sacred and the profane is often thin, and the gods themselves are never fully separated from the world they have created. Baiame's trickery is not the mischief of an impish figure, but the actions of a god who knows that the world can never be fully controlled, only gently nudged toward balance. Duremulum, too, embodies this balance. As the god of the sky, he is at once distant and all-encompassing, overseeing everything that happens beneath him. Yet, his trickster nature brings the divine down to earth, reminding the people that the gods are not far away, but present in every moment of life. His lightning bolts, his storms, are not signs of wrath, but symbols of his desire to keep the world in constant motion, to remind the people of the interconnectedness of all things. In this way, Duremulum teaches that the divine is not just something to be worshipped from afar, but something to be felt in the pulse of the earth and the crackle of the sky. The stories of Baiame and Duremulum are not simple tales of gods and trickery. They are reflections of the very spirit of the land, the eternal dance between creation and destruction, light and dark, order and chaos. Their mischief is not born of cruelty, but of a deep understanding of the world's complexity. They are gods who play with the threads of fate, weaving them together in ways that challenge and illuminate the lives of the people. Through their tricks, they remind the people that life is not meant to be controlled, but experienced fully, deeply, and without fear. In the land of the Aboriginal peoples, Biame and Duramulam are not just distant gods of the past, they are living forces, present in every gust of wind, and every storm that passes, in every moment of wonder and awe that fills the heart. Their trickery teaches the people that the world is not a static place, but a dynamic, ever-changing landscape, full of surprises and challenges. And just as the trickster gods weave their magic into the world, so too do they weave their wisdom into the hearts of those who listen, teaching that life is not just about surviving, but about embracing the mystery, the play, and the beauty that exists in every moment. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the mighty rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates cradled the first civilization, the gods held dominion over everything: life, death, creation, and destruction. Among them was Enki, a god of wisdom, but also a god of mischief, whose deeds shaped not just the world of gods, but the very lives of human beings. He was a trickster, but not in the usual sense. His tricks weren't about causing harm or playing pranks for amusement. They were about bending the laws of nature, challenging the status quo, and creating a space where humanity could flourish. Enki was a god who, if one were to believe the stories told by the ancient Sumerians, danced on the edges of both order and chaos, balancing between the wisdom of the divine and the freedom of mischief. He had the power to create life, yet it was through his trickery that humanity itself was brought into existence. It was Enki, after all, who had the audacity to defy the will of the other gods when they sought to punish humans. When the gods decided that humanity was too noisy, too messy, too full of chaos, Enki didn't just accept their verdict. He tricked them, using his cleverness and cunning to mold the fate of the humans who would come to shape the world. The gods had decided that humans would serve them, toiling under their heavy demands. They had created the first people to be laborers, slaves to the divine, tasked with the eternal job of providing for the gods. But it was Enki who, with his mischievous heart, could not stand to see such a fate befall humanity. And so, he acted, silently and cleverly, in the shadows of the divine halls. He created the first humans with his own hands, bending the clay to make their bodies, but it was his trick that gave them life. Enki's knowledge of the universe, his wisdom about the forces of creation and destruction, was what gave humanity its breath, its spark of life. As the other gods slept or watched from their distant realms, Enki whispered into the clay, imbuing it with the divine essence that would make the first humans truly human. His trick was not one of deception for selfish gain, but of love for his creation. Enki understood that wisdom alone wasn't enough for the humans to thrive. They needed more, something that would allow them to rise, to challenge the heavens, and to grow beyond the fate the other gods had set for them. So, he gave them a gift. Enki's trickery, however, didn't end with the creation of mankind. The stories of his wisdom and mischief wove through every part of the human experience. He was the god who taught the people the arts of civilization, how to farm the land, how to craft tools, how to build cities that could stand the test of time. The other gods were quick to demand service and sacrifice, but Enki, through his quiet manipulation, gave the humans the tools they needed to prosper. While other gods were concerned with power and control, Enki cared about knowledge, growth, and the flourishing of his creation. It wasn't just knowledge that Enki imparted to humanity, it was the power to think beyond their given roles, the courage to see the world in a new way. Through his trickery, Enki freed the human mind from the shackles of blind obedience. His wisdom allowed them to understand the stars, to read the land, and to create their own paths. It was through his cleverness that the first kings and priests arose, leaders who understood the balance between the divine and the mortal, between law and freedom. But Enki's trickery wasn't always as benevolent as it might seem. In one of the most famous myths, when the Great Flood was sent by the gods to wipe out humanity, it was Enki who warned the hero Atrahasis. The other gods had decided that humanity was too numerous, too loud, too unruly, and needed to be culled. But Enki, once again, could not stand by and watch the destruction of his creations. In a moment of pure trickery, he spoke to Atrahasis in a dream, urging him to build a great boat and save his family. The flood came, as the gods had decreed, but Enki's warning saved the human race from annihilation. It is this pattern of divine trickery, of bending the rules of fate and destiny, that marks Enki as one of the most intriguing figures in ancient mythology. His tricks weren't always kind in the conventional sense. They often challenged the divine order, upset the natural balance, and defied the expectations of the other gods. But in the end, his tricks led to the survival of humanity, to the gift of knowledge, and to the chance for mankind to rise above its humble beginnings. Enki wasn't just a trickster, he was a liberator, a god who understood the cost of freedom, and who was willing to take risks to ensure that humanity could write its own story. As the god of wisdom and trickery, Enki never stood still. He was the one who refused to be bound by the rigid rules of the universe, and it was through his cleverness that civilization itself began to flourish. He didn't ask for permission to challenge the gods or change the course of history, he simply did it. And in doing so, he taught humanity that wisdom and cunning are not always about playing by the rules. Sometimes, they're about rewriting the rules entirely. Enki's stories live on not just in the ancient texts of Mesopotamia, but in the hearts of those who understand that creation doesn't happen through passive obedience. It happens through the willingness to challenge, to question, and to disrupt the order of things for the greater good. Through Enki's tricks, humanity was given the tools to grow, to learn, and to eventually shape the world in ways that even the gods could not predict. In the end, Enki's legacy is one of quiet rebellion, of divine trickery that bends the rules of creation not for harm, but for hope, for life, and for the chance to be something more than what the gods had intended. There is a certain magic in mischief, a raw and undeniable power that comes from breaking the rules and watching the world tremble in the wake of a quiet rebellion. When the stories of the trickster gods are told, the gods of thunder and light, the ones with fire in their eyes, dominate the conversation. But the tricksters who really make you question the world are often those who move in silence, those whose very presence is an upheaval, not of force, but of subtlety and craft. These tricksters aren't just playful, they're revolutionary, turning expectations upside down and challenging everything society thought it knew. And in the realm of myth, some of the most powerful tricksters aren't gods at all, they are goddesses, wielding mischief as a tool to defy tradition and push the boundaries of gender and power. Take Eris, for instance. The Greek goddess of discord, her very name has become synonymous with chaos. She wasn't content with a quiet, graceful existence. No, Eris craved upheaval. It was she who tossed the golden apple into the midst of the gods, a simple, yet devastatingly clever act. The apple, marked for the fairest, was a gift to herself, a seed of discord meant to set the gods against one another. In the blink of an eye, the peace of the heavens shattered. Greed, jealousy, and vanity bubbled to the surface. The quarrel between the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite led directly to the Trojan War, an event that would shape the fates of countless mortals. What makes Eris so unforgettable is not just her ability to sow chaos, but her reason for doing so. She didn't fight with weapons or brute force. She simply understood the quiet power of a carefully placed disruption. Eris challenged the expectations placed on her. She didn't sit idly by waiting for divine approval or guidance. Instead, she went against the grain, turning a simple beauty contest into a world-changing conflict. She proved that even in a realm dominated by mighty gods, a woman's power could be just as destructive and just as necessary as any god's hammer or spear. Her mischief wasn't just petty, it was profound, affecting the lives of gods and mortals alike. Then there's Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of fire, volcanoes, and creation. While most gods in mythology are known for creating life or shaping the world, Pele did so with fire, chaos, and raw power. She was as dangerous as she was captivating, her rage capable of splitting mountains and carving new paths through the earth. But Pele's story is more than just that of a goddess with an explosive temper. Her story is one of competition, jealousy, and love, elements that are rarely attributed to goddesses in such a vivid way. Pele, like Eris, wasn't confined to a passive or secondary role. Her journey was one of claiming power, asserting dominance, and reshaping her world on her terms. When Pele's sister, Hayaka, was chosen to travel across the lands and deliver Pele's message, a rivalry was born. Pele's wrathful love and jealousy overpowered her affection for her sister. In her pursuit to make sure Hayaka did not succeed, Pele was willing to destroy everything in her path. Her desire for love was so deep, and her ways of expressing it so forceful, that she became a force of nature herself, a destructive force that demanded to be acknowledged. She wasn't a passive, patient figure, like the wives or mothers of other mythologies. She was active, fiery, and unapologetically intense. Pele wielded destruction as both a means of creation and a form of self-expression. She broke the rules of femininity with every eruption, showing that power didn't have to look the way society expected. In her fire, she carved out her own place in the world. The power of goddesses like Eris and Pele is often rooted in their defiance of expectations. They weren't created to serve, they were born to challenge. In a world where goddesses were often cast in supportive, nurturing roles, mothers, wives, or guardians, Eris and Pele tore down those boundaries. Their strength wasn't in their silence, but in their actions, their willingness to go beyond the prescribed limits. These goddesses wielded mischief as a weapon, proving that being a woman didn't have to mean being soft or invisible. They didn't ask for permission, they made their presence known by making waves, shaking the ground, and creating chaos. Even in the quieter trickster figures, the same energy pulses. Take the goddess Maui, whose myth flows through the islands of the Pacific. Maui wasn't just a trickster in the traditional sense, he was a shapeshifter, a disruptor of the natural order. He fished up the islands, slowed the sun, and even challenged death. Though Maui was often depicted as a male figure, in some traditions, he was seen as a feminine deity, showing that trickster energy isn't bound by gender. The story of Maui shows that even in a world where expectations of masculinity and femininity seemed clear, the power to disrupt, to challenge the natural world, and to carve out new paths was available to all. These trickster goddesses challenge us to rethink our perceptions of power. They were not the silent, obedient figures often portrayed in traditional mythologies. Instead, they were loud, unafraid, and unapologetic. They stepped into their power through their cunning and cleverness, not through force. Their trickery wasn't about undermining others for the sake of harm, it was about pushing the boundaries, creating new possibilities, and showing that mischief could be a form of empowerment. In these stories, the trickster goddesses teach us that the line between chaos and creation is often thinner than we realize. They remind us that the world, both divine and mortal, is shaped not just by force, but by the subtle, transformative power of disruption. Through their tricks, their mischief, and their divine actions, they remind us that sometimes the most profound changes come from those who refuse to follow the rules, those who bend the world to their will through wit, craft, and an unyielding belief in their own power. In the end, these goddesses of mischief show us that power, when wielded with cleverness, doesn't need to be loud to be heard. It doesn't need to conform to what society expects it to be. It simply needs to challenge, disrupt, and transform. In this, these trickster goddesses have forever carved a space where the divine and the rebellious coexist, where the feminine and the powerful are one and the same. In the beginning, there was nothing. Just an endless, silent void. Then, from the silence came a sound, a ripple, a shift that carried with it the promise of change. The trickster was there, in that moment, as both the spark and the storm. A trickster is never just a force of mischief. In many stories, these chaotic figures are also the creators, the ones who shape the world, even if it means tearing it apart first. Their role is far from simple, and yet, in their hands, the raw elements of the universe bend, twist, and come to life. The trickster's involvement in creation is as strange and paradoxical as the figure itself, the one who both builds and destroys, who weaves life into being through chaos. Take, for example, the ancient mythologies where trickster gods step into the void of creation and pull something out of it. There is no order in their methods, no careful blueprint to follow. Instead, their hands are guided by impulse, by the primal need to transform. In the world of these trickster gods, the very act of creation is born out of disruption, out of a breaking apart of the old in order to make way for something new. In one of the most well-known creation myths, the trickster god is the one who stirs the primordial waters, causing a storm that shatters the stillness. With a flick of their will, the waters divide, and the earth forms. It's as if the world itself was waiting for a force powerful enough to unravel it, to tear through the nothingness and stitch it together again, even more vibrant than before. The trickster brings creation into being, not with measured steps, but with bursts of wild energy. Their actions are unpredictable, but within the chaos lies an order all its own, one that only the trickster understands. But it's not just about the birth of the world. The trickster, in many myths, is also the one who breathes life into humankind, sometimes through deception, sometimes through sheer cleverness. They play with the raw materials of existence, whether it's clay, fire, or the very breath of life itself, twisting and turning these elements until they take shape. The act of creation, for the trickster, is not neat and tidy. It's messy, unpredictable, and alive with possibility. There are no straight lines, no precise measurements, no instructions to follow. It's creation from the very edge of disorder. Yet, there's always a price to pay. In these stories, the trickster's creative power is often accompanied by destruction. The chaos they bring is a double-edged sword. The force that creates is the same one that breaks. And in that breaking, there is a deeper form of creation, a transformation that comes only through loss. The trickster god doesn't simply build worlds or shape life, they also tear down, disrupt, and dismantle the old to make way for the new. The destruction is as much a part of creation as the construction itself. For the trickster, it's all intertwined, life and death, building and breaking, joy and sorrow. Each has its place in the grand design. Consider the myth of how the earth itself came to be. The trickster god, often seen as a wild figure full of cleverness, is the one who makes the earth by separating the sky from the sea. Their actions might seem reckless, even dangerous, but they open up the possibility for life to emerge in the spaces between. This separation of elements, sky and sea, earth and air, isn't just physical. It symbolizes the freedom that comes with creation, the idea that in order to bring something new into being, old structures must collapse. And so, creation emerges from the wreckage of what came before, like a phoenix rising from its own ashes. The trickster god, and their chaotic genius, understands this dance, creation through destruction, life through loss. The trickster's role in creation isn't just about their actions. It's about the transformation that follows. In many creation myths, the trickster's involvement is a catalyst, a spark that ignites change. Sometimes, this change is painful, the earth trembling beneath the trickster's touch, but in the end, it leads to something beautiful, something that would never have come to pass without that initial, chaotic act. For the trickster, creation is not something that happens according to a plan. It's the result of a spark, a sudden shift, an idea that bursts into existence. In many ways, the trickster is the ultimate creator, because they understand that creation isn't just about shaping something new. It's about the willingness to break something apart, to upset the world's balance, to challenge the norm. Without this spark of destruction, nothing would change. Nothing would evolve. This theme of creation through chaos and disorder runs throughout myths from every corner of the world. The trickster is the one who initiates the first great upheaval, the one who steps into the darkness and pulls light from it. They are the ones who shake the foundations of the world, not out of malice, but because they understand that to make room for new life, the old must be swept away. At the heart of it all lies a simple truth: creation and destruction are not opposites, but companions. In the hands of the trickster, they are two sides of the same coin. The trickster's role as both creator and destroyer speaks to a deeper understanding of the universe, that in order for new life to emerge, the old must sometimes be shattered. It's in the destruction that something new is born, something unpredictable and wild, something that could never have existed without that first, chaotic spark. So, When you hear the stories of the trickster gods, those figures who are at once creators and destroyers, remember that they are not merely figures of mischief. They are the architects of the world, shaping it through their wild, unpredictable acts. Their chaos is not a mistake, it is the very force that gives life to everything around us. They are the ones who remind us that creation is not always neat or orderly. Sometimes, it's born from the cracks, the fractures, and the wild energy of the universe itself. Through their tricks, the trickster gods show us that the world is made not just through careful planning, but through bold, reckless, and beautiful disruption. In the vast expanse of the universe, where stars are born and die, where galaxies collide, there is a force that pulses beneath the surface, a force of disruption and renewal. It is the chaos that stirs the cosmic balance, the disarray that fuels creation. And at the heart of this turbulence, standing as both instigator and mediator, are the trickster gods, whose wild acts of mischief shape the very fabric of existence. Think of the moments when the stars flicker in the night sky, their movements a dance of unpredictable beauty. Beneath that cosmic performance, there is a force at work, a trickster spirit that ensures the universe never settles into complacency. It is this force that ensures the universe remains alive, full of motion, full of mystery. The trickster god is no mere disruptor. They are, in many ways, the necessary force that holds the cosmos together, even as they tear it apart. Every culture has its own trickster god, a being who refuses to follow the rules, a god who embodies both the creation and destruction of the cosmos. The trickster, by nature, is unpredictable, wild, and free, yet in their mischief lies a delicate balance. Their actions might cause temporary chaos, but from that very chaos, new order emerges. The universe breathes through their actions, finding balance through their unpredictable acts. Without them, the cosmos would become stagnant, locked in a never-ending cycle of order without change. In many mythologies, the trickster is a figure who challenges the natural order, yet paradoxically, they are a keeper of it. They are the catalyst for change, stirring the pot of existence until something new emerges. Whether it's causing the earth to split open or bringing fire to humankind, their actions are never meaningless. They are an essential force, the one who breaks the mold and reshapes the world. Through their chaos, the universe finds balance. It's as if they understand that the natural order cannot exist without the push of disorder. In the quiet moments of reflection, we realize that the trickster does not act out of malice or selfishness. They act because the world requires it, because, in order for life to flourish, there must be room for the unexpected. Their chaos is not a force of destruction for destruction's sake, but the very thing that allows the world to breathe. It is the disordered spark that ignites the fire of creation. In their acts, there is a fundamental understanding that things must change for growth to happen. A stagnant world would crumble, but one constantly shifting, constantly evolving, is one that can continue to expand. The trickster makes that growth possible, ensuring that the universe never stops moving. Consider the trickster's role in bringing forth the seasons, and awakening the sun or pulling it away again. They are the breath of life, the force that ensures nothing remains the same. Their mischief is not an accident, it is part of a larger cosmic pattern that must unfold. If everything were always in perfect order, there would be no room for transformation. There would be no creation from destruction, no growth from chaos. And the universe would cease to evolve. The trickster gods remind us that disorder is not something to fear, but something to embrace. In every myth and every tale, they stand as symbols of the unpredictable forces that create and sustain life. They are the ones who shake things up, who challenge the status quo, and in doing so, they provide the space for something new to emerge. Without their disruptions, the world would be like a clock that ticks without change, its hands frozen in place. Yet, in their chaos, the trickster gods bring about a strange, powerful order, an order that is not rigid but fluid, ever-changing and adaptive. Their role is not to destroy for the sake of destruction, but to clear the path for growth, for creation, for evolution. It's in their actions that the great cycles of the cosmos, birth, death, and rebirth, find their rhythm. The trickster's mischief might seem dangerous, but it is, in fact, the breath of life, the very pulse that drives the universe forward. As the trickster god causes the stars to fall from the sky or the seas to rise in fury, they also ensure that these very things return to their places. Their chaotic acts may seem random or even violent, but they are always part of a larger, intricate dance, a cosmic waltz that ensures balance is restored. For without the balance of creation and destruction, the universe would not exist as we know it. In this light, the trickster god is both the creator and the destroyer, the force that both shakes and steadies the world. They bring forth disorder because it is the very thing that creates the conditions for life to thrive. Their role is essential because they ensure that the universe is not static, but alive, ever-changing, ever-growing. The trickster is the wild heartbeat of the cosmos, and without their energy, everything would grind to a halt. In the moments of stillness, we are reminded of the importance of these cosmic forces. We see the balance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction, and we begin to understand that these forces are not enemies but necessary companions in the grand dance of the universe. The trickster gods, and all their wildness and mischief, show us that life is never about maintaining a perfect, static order. It's about embracing change, about welcoming the chaos that gives birth to new possibilities. So, when the trickster god steps onto the stage, when they stir the winds and cause the earth to tremble, remember that their actions are not in vain. They are the ones who ensure that life continues to evolve, that the cosmos remains vibrant and full of potential. They are the ones who keep the balance of creation and destruction, reminding us that everything is always in motion, always transforming. In their disorder, they bring order; in their chaos, they bring life. And in that delicate balance, the universe spins on. In a world where rules seem to bind every action, there exists a force that cannot be contained. It moves like a shadow, slipping through the cracks of convention, defying expectations, and teaching lessons in ways that seem unexpected, even unfair. This force is the trickster god, a figure who, through deception and cunning, imparts wisdom, shifting the moral compass and offering perspectives that challenge everything we think we know about right and wrong. Think of the times when life feels too rigid, too predictable. The rules that govern society, the codes of conduct we are all supposed to follow, they can feel suffocating. But in the stories of trickster gods, there is a breath of fresh air, a reminder that the world isn't just about following the rules. Sometimes, the greatest lessons come not from doing what is expected, but from questioning the very fabric of those expectations. The trickster god does not fit the mold of the perfect hero. They do not show up with righteous intentions, always acting by the book. No, they often mislead, deceive, and trick those around them. But in this very mischief lies the power of their teaching. Through their tricks, they force us to confront our beliefs, challenge the established norms, and see the world through a different lens. One of the greatest paradoxes of the trickster is that their deception isn't really about causing harm or gaining something for themselves. Often, their cunning serves a greater purpose. They are not just deceiving for the sake of it, they are revealing truths that might be hidden in plain sight. In many ways, their mischief uncovers the deeper layers of reality, the hidden lessons about power, morality, and human nature. Their actions, while seemingly selfish or cruel at times, force others to reflect on the bigger picture, on what truly matters. Take, for example, the stories of the trickster gods who deceive for the benefit of humanity. They often disrupt the balance of power either within the divine realm or between gods and mortals, to right some perceived wrong or to bring about change. Their actions often expose the flaws in the system. The trickster doesn't just play with power, they show us that sometimes authority itself is flawed and needs to be questioned. In doing so, they teach a fundamental lesson about justice and fairness that doesn't always line up with what we think is right. Yet, their methods are never straightforward. The trickster teaches us that wisdom doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes, the truth is hidden beneath layers of lies, half-truths, and riddles. They teach that life isn't just black and white, it's filled with shades of gray. Their deception, however frustrating it may seem, is a tool to reveal a deeper understanding of the world, one that isn't bound by rules or limitations. Through their antics, trickster gods push the boundaries of conventional morality. They do not conform to the typical idea of right and wrong. Instead, they present an alternative view, one where the usual definitions of morality are questioned. Is it right to break a promise if doing so will bring about a greater good? Is it wrong to deceive if it leads to wisdom or enlightenment? The trickster god plays with these questions, forcing us to rethink our assumptions and reconsider what is truly moral. But it's not just about challenging moral standards, it's about showing us the complexity of human nature. The trickster is often flawed, imperfect, and even self-serving at times. But these imperfections are not to be shunned, they are to be embraced. The trickster teaches us that we are not defined by our mistakes, but by how we learn and grow from them. Their flaws are not failures, but lessons in resilience, adaptability, and the importance of questioning the world around us. The beauty of the trickster god's teaching lies in its ability to shake up the status quo. They are the agents of change, the ones who refuse to let things stay as they are. They show us that growth isn't always comfortable, it's often messy, unpredictable, and confusing. But in that chaos, something profound is happening. The world is being shaped, redefined, and remade, just as we are, too. The trickster doesn't just teach through their actions, they teach us about ourselves, about the ways we can grow, adapt, and see beyond the surface of things. Through their unpredictable ways, the trickster god reminds us that life doesn't always go according to plan, and that's okay. Sometimes, the detours, the unexpected twists, are where we learn the most. The trickster teaches us that there is no single, right path to follow. Sometimes, it's in the confusion, in the chaos, that we find the most meaningful lessons. The trickster god opens our eyes to the truth that life is not a straight line, but a winding road with moments of brilliance and folly, victory and failure, wisdom and foolishness. In every story of the trickster, there is a moment where everything is turned upside down. What we thought we knew, what we thought was true, is questioned. The trickster god offers an alternative perspective, a new way of looking at the world. They make us realize that the rules we follow might not be the only path to wisdom and truth. Through their playful tricks, through their cunning ways, they offer us the gift of seeing life in a different light. The trickster god doesn't just teach through words, they teach through actions. They break the rules, they deceive, they challenge everything that seems solid. And in the end, they show us that the world is much more complicated, much more beautiful, and much more full of possibilities than we could have ever imagined. In the flickering lights of a movie theater or the pages of a graphic novel, one figure often stands out in a way that makes the audience laugh, gasp, and sometimes even cringe. They don't follow the rules, they bend them, break them, and sometimes even flip them on their heads. These figures, with their wicked sense of humor and chaotic ways, somehow grab our attention more than the heroic, straight-laced characters we are used to. They are tricksters, and they've never truly gone away. You can find them in the twisted grin of the Joker, who dances between madness and genius, or in Deadpool, whose reckless, unpredictable nature is as endearing as it is dangerous. These characters, who have become household names, are not so different from the ancient gods and spirits who played with fate and order. Their actions, though sometimes destructive, challenge the boundaries of good and evil, asking the audience, what if the rules don't matter? What if chaos is where the real power lies? The trickster in modern culture is not simply a villain or a fool. No, they are more than that. They represent the tension between order and chaos, the push against the conventions of society, and the desire to break free from the cages that bind us. Whether in comic books, films, or television shows, tricksters are the ultimate disruptors, and it is this very disruption that pulls us in. They force us to think differently, to question the status quo, and to feel a strange, exhilarating mix of fear and fascination. Consider the Joker, a character whose very existence challenges everything we know about morality and sanity. He is not motivated by personal gain, nor does he seek to conquer the world. His goals are simpler and far more terrifying. He wants to show the world how fragile it really is, how quickly things can fall apart. With each plot, with each chaotic move, he seeks to break down the illusions that bind society together. His madness is a mirror to our own, reflecting the ways we deceive ourselves into thinking that things are safe, predictable, and under control. The Joker is a trickster in every sense, a harbinger of chaos who seeks to reveal the cracks in the foundation of the world. Deadpool, too, is a trickster in his own right. His playful disregard for rules and his ability to break the fourth wall between the story and the audience make him a modern-day embodiment of the trickster. With a sarcastic quip and a disregard for traditional heroism, Deadpool disrupts the very notion of what it means to be a hero. He doesn't fight for justice, for morality, or for anything that fits into the classic idea of right and wrong. Instead, he does what feels right to him, no matter the consequences. His humor, his unpredictability, and his sheer refusal to follow the script make him a perfect example of the trickster god reinvented for the modern world. These modern tricksters, like their ancient counterparts, challenge the very systems that hold our world together. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in. They mock the ideals of society, order, discipline, morality, and ask us to question them. And in this questioning, we find a sense of freedom, a liberation from the confines of what we've been taught to believe. The trickster is, in many ways, the embodiment of our own desire to break free from the ordinary, to see the world from a new angle, and to embrace the chaos that makes life interesting. But what is it about these tricksters that make them so irresistible? It's not just their ability to deceive or outwit those around them. It's the way they remind us of our own flaws, our own imperfections. They show us that being human isn't about being perfect or following the rules. It's about embracing our contradictions, our messiness, and our ability to rise above the limitations that others set for us. The trickster god doesn't conform to any standard, they rewrite the rules of the game, and in doing so, they inspire us to do the same. There's something deeply satisfying about watching these characters in action. They operate outside the boundaries of tradition, operating on their own terms. They don't have to play by anyone's rules, and it's this freedom that makes them so compelling. In a world that often feels too structured, too predictable, the trickster offers a taste of something more exciting, something unexpected. They remind us that there is more than one way to achieve a goal, more than one way to live a life. And just like their ancient ancestors, these trickster figures in modern media often serve as reflections of the human condition. Their flaws, their contradictions, and their inability to fit into neat categories make them more relatable than the perfect heroes who follow the rules. They show us that it's okay to be imperfect, to break the rules, to make mistakes. In fact, they might even show us that those mistakes are where the real lessons lie. Even more than that, they offer a space where creativity and imagination can roam free. Where heroes are bound by a sense of duty and morality, tricksters are bound by nothing. They bend reality, shift identities, and manipulate the story itself. Their very presence in a film, a book, or a show changes the dynamics of the world around them. They bring an element of surprise, a spark of unpredictability that makes everything feel more alive, more vivid. And in a world where so many things feel planned, rehearsed, and predictable, the trickster offers a breath of fresh air. It's no wonder that tricksters have remained such enduring figures in popular culture. They have the power to break through the walls of tradition, to transform everything they touch, and to leave a lasting impact on the audience. They remind us of the magic of disorder, of how sometimes, in the chaos, we find the most profound truths. Through their deception, their cleverness, and their tricks, they teach us to look beyond the surface, to question what we know, and to embrace the unknown. And in this embrace, we find the freedom to be ourselves, imperfect, unpredictable, and utterly human. There's something unsettling about the trickster. The way they slip between the cracks of society's expectations, wearing 1,000 different faces. One moment, they're laughing at the world, and the next, they're forcing it to look at itself in the mirror, revealing the chaos and contradictions hiding underneath. It's a quiet, almost uncomfortable power. The kind that makes you question everything, what you know, who you are, and what you've been taught to believe. Tricksters are not just characters in stories, they are reflections of something deeper. Something raw and primal that we often try to suppress. In the world of psychology, they are symbols of the unconscious, representing parts of ourselves that we don't fully understand, or that we're too afraid to confront. They break down the walls we've built around ourselves and society, exposing the lies we've been told and the truths we've buried. They do this not with violence, but with cleverness, with humor, and often with a deep understanding of the human soul. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, saw the trickster as a powerful archetype in the collective unconscious, a universal figure that exists in every culture, every myth. To Jung, the trickster was not just a mischievous character who made people laugh. The trickster was the shadow, the part of the psyche that we ignore or repress. The trickster embodies everything we try to keep hidden: the chaos, the unpredictability, the impulses that refuse to fit neatly into society's tidy boxes. And in doing so, they challenge the very foundation of authority. When we look at tricksters, we are forced to confront our own inner contradictions. The parts of us that are both good and bad, light and dark, organized and chaotic. Tricksters embody these contradictions in their every move, in the very essence of their being. They don't live by the rules, and in doing so, they force us to ask, what would happen if I stopped pretending to be perfect? What would happen if I embraced the wild, untamed side of myself that I've hidden away for so long? The trickster isn't simply a rebel for the sake of rebellion. Their mischief and deception are purposeful, even if we don't always understand why. Their role is not just to disrupt, but to transform. They show us the limits of our thinking and push us beyond them. They challenge us to break out of the patterns we've fallen into, to face the things we're avoiding, and to question the structures that control us. Through their actions, tricksters guide us towards self-discovery, even if the path is messy, uncomfortable, and uncertain. On a personal level, encountering a trickster, whether in a myth, a story, or within ourselves, forces a confrontation with the unconscious. It's as if a veil is lifted, and we're forced to see the world as it truly is, not as we've been told it should be. Tricksters show us that reality is not as simple as we like to think. It's fragmented, unpredictable, and ever-changing. They reveal the lies we live by and the masks we wear. They challenge us to step out of our comfort zones and to embrace the unknown, the chaotic, and the uncertain. And in doing so, they spark growth, both personal and societal. Think of a moment in your life when everything seemed to fall apart. When what you thought you knew turned out to be wrong. It might have felt like you were losing control, but in truth, you were being forced to change. The trickster is like that moment of upheaval. They make us uncomfortable, but they make us grow. In their mischief, they show us that there is something beyond the ordinary, something more expansive and liberating, if we are willing to accept the chaos. The trickster is also a direct challenge to authority, both external and internal. They question the rules we live by, turning them upside down and showing us their absurdities. They make us question why we follow the rules at all, why we submit to authority without thinking. They represent the parts of ourselves that refuse to be tamed, the parts that know we are more than what society tells us to be. In doing so, they spark revolutions, not just in the world around us, but within ourselves. By challenging the established order, the trickster shows us that there is no one right way to live, that there is freedom in chaos, and that real change begins when we dare to break the mold. Yet, it's important to remember that the trickster is not inherently evil. Their actions can seem destructive, but they are often the catalyst for something new. The chaos they create clears the way for transformation. It's through disruption that the old, outdated structures are torn down, making room for something better, something truer to who we are. This process can be painful and uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Without the trickster, we would never question the foundations of our world. We would never see what lies beneath the surface of our lives. In mythology and in real life, the trickster's role is not to destroy for the sake of destruction. Instead, they show us that sometimes, in order to build something new, something beautiful, something real, we must first tear down the old. The trickster brings us closer to understanding our own unconscious motivations, desires, and fears. They help us to shed the layers of pretense we have built around ourselves and to face the truth that lies beneath. In the end, the trickster's true gift is not the chaos they create, but the transformation they bring. They force us to confront our own shadows, to face our deepest fears and contradictions, and to embrace the freedom that comes with letting go of the rules we've always followed. They challenge the authority that tells us who we should be, and they offer us the chance to redefine ourselves. Their mischief is not just a form of rebellion, but a call to awaken, to break free from the limitations of our own making, and to live with authenticity in a world that is anything but predictable. When we look at the trickster, whether in the myths of old or in our own lives, we see a reflection of our own potential for change, for growth, and for the freedom that comes from embracing all parts of ourselves. The trickster might be messy, chaotic, and unpredictable, but in their wake, they leave us with a new understanding of who we are and what we are capable of. And sometimes, that is the most important lesson of all. There is a feeling in the air when something shifts. When the impossible becomes possible, and old structures tremble in the face of something new. It's that spark of rebellion that ignites change, a quiet whisper of defiance that grows louder until it echoes through history. The trickster is never far from the heart of this movement. They've always been there, pushing boundaries, questioning authority, and showing us the way forward by pulling the rug out from under us. In today's world, the trickster is alive and well. You can see them in the protests on the streets, in the ideas that challenge the status quo, and in the voices that refuse to be silenced. They're the ones who laugh at the system, who mock the powerful, and who encourage us to see the world through a different lens. They remind us that the rules aren't always right, that sometimes the ones in power are the very ones who need to be questioned the most. They remind us that society isn't a set of unmovable truths, it's a construct, one that can be torn down, remade, and shaped again by those brave enough to step outside the lines. Look around, and you'll see the trickster at the heart of so many movements that have reshaped our world. The civil rights movement, feminist activism, LGBTQ+ rights, these are all stories of rebellion, of standing up against the norms, the structures, the expectations. In every protest, in every speech, in every challenge to the old ways, there's a trickster's touch. It's the defiant, clever, and sometimes playful energy that says, no, this isn't the way it has to be. They take what we know, twist it, and turn it into something that makes us question everything. Through their antics, their subversive humor, they make us think, make us see injustice where we might have once been blind, and make us feel the sting of discomfort when we realize that the world we've accepted may not be the world we deserve. The trickster is the one who sees the flaws in society and refuses to ignore them. They might make us laugh at first, but underneath that laughter is a deep, sometimes painful truth. The trickster holds up a mirror and forces us to look at ourselves and at our society. They challenge the foundations that we've come to believe are solid. Who says the rich should be rich? Who says the poor should stay poor? Why do we accept the rules that only benefit a few? The trickster doesn't just break the rules, they make us question the very idea of rules. They remind us that things could be different if we choose to make them so. They live in the spaces where contradictions thrive, where authority doesn't hold all the answers. They question what it means to be good or evil, right or wrong. They turn morality on its head and show us that sometimes the line between them is blurred. In the trickster's world, there is no simple good or bad. Instead, they show us the complexity of life, how sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules, and sometimes those who seem like villains are the ones bringing about necessary change. It's in the trickster's nature to reflect our own contradictions back at us. We are taught to obey, to conform, to stay within the lines. But what if the lines are drawn in the wrong places? What if what we've been told is right isn't actually right at all? What if the very people we've been taught to respect are the ones who need to be challenged? The trickster asks us these questions with their every action. They challenge the way we think about identity, authority, and the world around us. And it's not just about rebellion for rebellion's sake. Tricksters bring something deeper to the table. They show us how creativity can lead to freedom. They show us that the world doesn't have to be as it seems, that change is possible, and it can come from the most unexpected places. They help us imagine a world beyond the one we've been handed, one that is not bound by tradition, expectation, or restriction. They teach us that we don't have to fit the mold that society has made for us. Consider the figures we look up to in modern culture, the ones who spark revolution, who bring new ideas to life. The Joker, Deadpool, or even characters like Loki from the Marvel Universe, they may seem chaotic, even dangerous, but at their core, they represent the spirit of change. The Joker, with his wild antics, doesn't just want to destroy, he wants to tear down the system itself, to show the world how fragile its foundations really are. Deadpool, with his irreverent humor, challenges what it means to be a hero and questions the very idea of morality. These characters may not always act in ways we admire, but they make us think. They show us how change can come from unexpected places, how it's possible to break free from the constraints of society's rules and carve out a new path forward. In every corner of the world, there are voices rising up, voices that echo the Trickster's call for justice, for freedom, and for change. They challenge norms, fight for equality, and speak truth to power. The Trickster is not just a figure from ancient myth, they are the spirit that moves through society, urging us to question the world as it is and to imagine the world as it could be. Through their antics, their chaos, and their laughter, they spark a fire that burns brighter every day, pushing us to redefine who we are and what we stand for. The Trickster reminds us that the path to justice is rarely straightforward. It's filled with twists and turns, moments of confusion, and the unexpected. But it's in that very chaos that we find growth, understanding, and the power to change the world. They challenge us to look at ourselves and ask, are we part of the problem? Are we content to follow the rules, or will we have the courage to break them? Tricksters force us to confront the parts of ourselves and our society that we'd rather ignore, and in doing so, they help us become better, more aware, and more capable of creating the change that the world so desperately needs. The world has always needed the Trickster, whether they know it or not. From the moment the first myths were born, these figures have played a vital part in shaping stories that transcend time and place. They are the mischievous figures who cause chaos and disorder, the ones who slip between the cracks of everyday life to challenge what we think we know. Yet, paradoxically, it is through this very chaos that something new is born. Something better, something brighter, something that can't be contained by tradition or authority. The Trickster doesn't just break the rules, they make us question why those rules exist in the first place. They serve as a reminder that things don't always have to be as they are. They teach us that sometimes, in order to understand the truth, we must first break things apart, shake them up, and rebuild them. Without the Trickster's pranks, there would be no growth, no evolution, no change. In the great tapestry of mythology, these figures stand out, not because of their power, but because of their ability to transform reality itself. Whether it's Anansi weaving the world's stories, Loki stirring up conflict in Asgard, or Prometheus defying the gods to bring fire to humanity, the Trickster is the catalyst of change. They make the world more interesting, more complicated, more full of possibility. They teach us that nothing is set in stone, that life is messy, unpredictable, and, at times, unjust. But they also show us that this mess is where true power lies. The power to create, to destroy, to change. It's the Trickster who teaches us that even in the face of authority, even in the darkest moments of despair, there is always room for humor, for play, and for the unexpected. They remind us that to survive, sometimes we must be willing to bend the rules, take risks, and laugh in the face of adversity. It's the Trickster's laughter that brings light into the darkest corners of our world, showing us that even when things seem hopeless, there is always another way, another solution, another chance. And somehow, through all their deception and trickery, the Trickster figures don't just change the world around them, they change us. In their bold, fearless defiance of norms, they open doors inside our minds that we may have long ignored. They invite us to reconsider everything we think we know. They question everything from the gods to human nature to what it means to be good or to be bad. They show us that morality is not a straight line but a complicated web of choices, motives, and outcomes. As time has gone on, the Trickster figure has evolved, taken new forms, and influenced the stories we tell today. From the sharp wit of Deadpool to the chaotic genius of the Joker, these characters still carry the same essence of the ancient Trickster gods. They thrive in modern pop culture, challenging norms, defying authority, and making us laugh while asking us to think deeply about the world we live in. They are the ones who turn the world on its head, the ones who remind us that the status quo is never as solid as it seems. In them, we see the power of imagination, of rebellion, of change. In fact, the trickster's influence is so enduring because they tap into something universally human. They are reflections of our own contradictions, our inner rebellions, and the tension between the desire for order and the yearning for freedom. The trickster speaks to that part of us that refuses to be controlled, that refuses to be confined by the rules of society. They challenge us to look at our own lives and ask, what rules have I accepted without question? What structures have I built my life around, and do they still serve me? When we look at the trickster in mythology, we see more than just a figure of mischief and chaos. We see a mirror of ourselves, of our own frustrations, hopes, and desires. The trickster might break the world apart, but they also build it anew, showing us the possibility of transformation. They remind us that change often comes from the most unexpected sources, from the ones who challenge authority, from the ones who laugh in the face of what's comfortable and safe. In this sense, the trickster's legacy is not just one of stories or ancient gods, but of the human spirit. They teach us that we don't have to accept the world as it is. We can bend the rules, challenge the systems that keep us confined, and laugh along the way. They show us that chaos is not to be feared, but embraced, for in chaos there is the chance for something better, something more honest, something more true. Perhaps this is the reason why trickster figures continue to captivate us, from ancient myths to modern films. They embody the spirit of transformation, the power to change, to grow, to challenge, and to laugh at the world's limitations. They remind us that the greatest power lies not in conformity, but in the willingness to break free from the chains that bind us. And in doing so, they help shape the world anew, one trick at a time.